The desert heat struck Jake Castellanos like a physical blow as he stepped off the transport helicopter at forward operating base Meridian. Sand particles whipped across the landing pad, stinging his face despite the protective goggles he wore. His first deployment, his first real assignment, and already the Middle Eastern sun felt different from anything he had experienced during training at Camp Pendleton. Jake shouldered his heavy pack and followed the other arriving Marines toward the main compound. The base sprawled before him in a maze of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and communication towers that pierced the cloudless sky. Dust covered everything with a fine coating that spoke of endless, grinding months in this hostile environment. After processing through the administrative checkpoint, Jake located Building C, where he was scheduled for gear inspection and mission briefing. The structure looked identical to dozen others scattered across the base, distinguished only by faded numbers stenciled on its exterior walls. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of equipment lockers and tactical displays. Jake found his assigned station and began unpacking his gear for inspection. Combat boots, body armor, ammunition pouches, communication equipment, and medical supplies spread across the metal table in precise arrangements. Everything had to meet exact specifications before he could be cleared for patrol duty. As he arranged his equipment, a woman approached his station. She appeared to be in her early 30s, wearing standard desert camouflage utilities without any visible rank insignia or name tape. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her manner suggested someone accustomed to authority, though Jake assumed she was another newly arrived Marine going through the same processing routine. The woman examined his gear layout with professional interest, then spoke with quiet confidence. "You need to modify your patrol route assignment for tomorrow morning. Sector 7 should be avoided completely, and I recommend using the northern approach through Checkpoint Delta instead." Jake looked up from organizing his ammunition pouches, surprised by her directness. He had not requested advice about patrol routes, and he certainly had not expected another trainee to start giving him tactical suggestions before he had even completed his gear inspection. "I think I can handle my own mission planning." "Thanks," Jake replied with a slight grin, returning his attention to his equipment. The route assignments came from command, and he saw no reason to second-guess orders from his superiors based on suggestions from someone who appeared to be at his same level of experience. The woman did not move away from his station. Her expression remained neutral as she continued speaking. "There have been 3 confirmed IED placements along that route in the past week. The enemy has established pattern recognition for patrols using that approach, and they have adapted their tactics accordingly. The northern route provides better sight lines and reduces exposure to known threat areas." Jake straightened and looked at her more carefully. She spoke with technical precision about improvised explosive devices and enemy tactics, but something about her confidence struck him as presumptuous. New Marines often tried to impress others with theoretical knowledge gained from training manuals, and Jake suspected this was exactly that kind of performance. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but I think the people who plan these routes probably know what they are doing," Jake said, his tone becoming more pointed. "I have been training for this deployment for months, and I am not about to start changing official orders based on suggestions from someone I just met." Other Marines at nearby stations began glancing in their direction, drawn by the tension in Jake's voice. The woman noticed this attention but showed no reaction to his dismissive words. Instead, she pulled a field tablet from her cargo pocket and made several notations with a stylus. "The tactical concerns I mentioned are based on current intelligence regarding enemy activity patterns in that sector," she said calmly, finishing her notes. "I strongly recommend you reconsider the route modification." Jake felt his patience disappearing entirely. The woman's persistence annoyed him, and her assumption that he needed guidance from another trainee struck him as arrogant. He decided to make his position clear in terms that would end this unwanted conversation. "Listen, wannabe commander," Jake said loudly enough for several nearby Marines to hear. "I do not know what kind of authority you think you have here, but I am not taking tactical advice from someone who looks like she just finished basic training herself. Maybe save the expert analysis for someone who asked for it." The woman closed her tablet and regarded him with steady eyes that revealed nothing about her reaction to his words. She had not raised her voice or shown any sign of anger, which somehow made Jake feel even more justified in his dismissal of her suggestions. "Your position has been noted," she said simply, then turned and walked toward the exit without another word. Sergeant Torres, who had been observing from across the room, approached Jake's station as the woman disappeared through the doorway. The sergeant's weathered face showed an expression that Jake could not quite interpret, something between concern and discomfort. "Everything all right over here, Castellanos?" Torres asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Just someone trying to play commanding officer when she should be focusing on her own gear inspection," Jake replied, returning to his equipment arrangement. "Some people watch too many military movies and think they know how things work in the real world." Torres nodded slowly but said nothing more about the incident. He completed his inspection of Jake's gear with professional efficiency, checking each item against the required standards before marking his clipboard with approval. Jake felt satisfied that he had handled the situation correctly, establishing clear boundaries about unsolicited advice from peers. As Jake finished packing his inspected equipment, he overheard two communications specialists discussing patrol coordination near the tactical display board. One mentioned receiving updated intelligence about threat assessments in various sectors, including specific warnings about Sector 7 that matched exactly what the woman had told him. Jake dismissed this as coincidence. Intelligence information circulated throughout the base through multiple channels, and it was natural that different people would have access to similar reports. This did not change his assessment that the woman had overstepped appropriate boundaries by approaching him with unsolicited tactical advice. The gear inspection complete, Jake reported to the operations center for his initial briefing on patrol procedures and area familiarization. The briefing officer, Lieutenant Morrison, provided detailed information about local geography, known threat areas, and communication protocols that would govern his activities during the deployment. Morrison emphasized the importance of following established procedures and maintaining proper chain of command during all operations. Jake felt vindicated by this emphasis on protocol and proper authority structures. The lieutenant's guidance confirmed his belief that accepting tactical advice from unauthorized personnel would undermine good military order and discipline. As the briefing concluded, Jake prepared for his first patrol assignment scheduled for the following morning. His route would take him through Sector 7 as originally planned, following the orders he had received from legitimate command authority. He felt confident in his preparation and pleased that he had maintained appropriate professional boundaries despite the unwanted interference he had encountered during gear inspection. The sun was setting over forward operating base Meridian as Jake returned to his assigned quarters. Tomorrow would bring his first real test in combat deployment, and he intended to prove himself worthy of the trust his commanders had placed in him by following orders exactly as given. Dawn brought harsh light across the desert landscape as Jake Castellanos prepared for his first patrol mission. He strapped on his body armor with practiced efficiency, checking each piece of equipment one final time before joining his assigned team at the vehicle depot. The morning air carried the smell of diesel fuel and hot sand that would define the next several hours of his deployment. Staff Sergeant Williams briefed the patrol team on their route through Sector 7, emphasizing the importance of maintaining communication protocols and following established procedures. Jake felt eager anticipation building as Williams outlined their mission objectives and expected timeline for the operation. The patrol consisted of 2 armored vehicles carrying 6 Marines total, with Jake assigned as point man for the lead vehicle. His responsibility included navigation, threat identification, and radio communication with base operations during the mission. This represented exactly the kind of active duty he had trained for during months of preparation. As the vehicles rolled through the main gate, Jake reviewed his route map one final time. The path through Sector 7 would take them past several key checkpoints before returning to base after a 4-hour circuit. Intelligence reports mentioned possible enemy activity in the area, but nothing that seemed beyond the capabilities of their well-equipped team. Meanwhile, in the Tactical Operations Center at Forward Operating Base Meridian, Elena Voss settled into her position before a bank of monitoring screens that displayed feeds from multiple surveillance sources. Drone cameras, satellite imagery, and ground-based sensors provided comprehensive coverage of all patrol activities in the surrounding area. Elena activated her communication headset and began coordinating with the various support elements that would track Jake's patrol throughout their mission. Her fingers moved across multiple keyboards as she accessed real-time intelligence data and cross-referenced it with known threat patterns in Sector 7. The patrol vehicles appeared on her primary monitor as small moving icons against a detailed map overlay. Elena could see Jake's team following their planned route directly into the sector she had warned him to avoid. Her expression remained neutral as she began implementing protective measures that would operate invisibly in the background. Jake's voice crackled through the radio as his team reached the first checkpoint. "This is Alpha Team approaching Waypoint 1, he transmitted, though his call sign usage was imprecise according to established protocols. "Everything looks clear from our position, continuing to Waypoint 2. Elena noted the sloppy radio procedure in her field tablet while simultaneously directing a surveillance drone to provide better coverage of Jake's advancing position. The drone shifted its flight pattern to maintain optimal visual contact with the patrol vehicles as they moved deeper into potentially dangerous territory. As Jake's team progressed through Sector 7, Elena's multiple screens showed intelligence data that would have alarmed any experienced operator. Heat signatures indicating possible enemy positions appeared in several locations along the planned route, while communication intercepts suggested coordinated activity in the immediate area. Jake's second radio transmission revealed his position with unnecessary specificity, violating basic operational security protocols that were designed to prevent enemy forces from tracking patrol movements. Elena immediately contacted the communications center to implement signal masking procedures that would obscure the patrol's actual location from hostile monitoring. The patrol vehicles continued advancing as Elena coordinated with drone operators to maintain protective overwatch. She redirected 2 additional unmanned aircraft to provide comprehensive coverage of potential threat areas that Jake's team would encounter during the next phase of their mission. Through her surveillance feeds, Elena watched Jake's team encounter their first sign of suspicious activity when thermal imaging revealed recently disturbed soil along their intended path. Jake's response demonstrated the aggressive confidence that had characterized his attitude during their previous encounter at the gear inspection station. Rather than following standard protocols for investigating potential threats, Jake directed his team to push forward rapidly through the area. His radio communication indicated that he considered the disturbance to be routine maintenance activity rather than a possible improvised explosive device placement. Elena's fingers moved quickly across her control interface as she activated countermeasures designed to protect Jake's team from their own poor judgment. She directed ground-penetrating radar sweeps of the route ahead, while simultaneously coordinating with explosive ordnance disposal teams that could provide emergency response if needed. The surveillance drone footage showed Jake's vehicles approaching the exact location where intelligence reports had identified recent enemy activity. Elena could see heat signatures that suggested hostile personnel in concealed positions overlooking the patrol route, but Jake's team continued advancing without apparent awareness of their exposure. Elena activated her encrypted communication channel to coordinate with close air support assets positioned to provide emergency assistance. 2 attack helicopters received updated targeting information and moved to standby positions where they could respond immediately if Jake's patrol encountered hostile fire. Jake's third radio transmission revealed his team's position with even less regard for operational security than his previous communications. "This is Alpha Team at Waypoint 3, he announced, providing specific coordinates that could be used by enemy forces to target his location. "Area appears secure, proceeding to final checkpoint." Elena's protective coordination intensified as Jake's team approached the most dangerous section of their route. Intelligence data indicated that enemy forces had established firing positions specifically designed to target patrols using the path that Jake had insisted on following despite her warnings. The critical moment arrived when Jake's lead vehicle passed within meters of a concealed, improvised explosive device that had been placed along the roadside during the previous night. Elena's countermeasures had included electronic jamming of the device's remote detonation system, preventing activation at the precise moment when Jake's vehicle was most vulnerable. Jake remained completely unaware that his survival had depended on Elena's invisible intervention. His radio transmission following the near-miss incident reflected satisfaction with his team's performance rather than recognition of the danger they had narrowly avoided. Alpha Team completing final waypoint, Jake announced as his patrol began the return journey to base. Mission accomplished with no incidents to report. Area secure and route clear for future operations. Elena watched the patrol vehicles disappear from her primary monitoring screen as they returned to the safety of forward operating base Meridian. Her field tablet contained detailed documentation of every protective measure she had implemented during the mission, along with analysis of the tactical errors that could have resulted in casualties without her unseen coordination. As Jake's team arrived at the vehicle depot, he felt genuine pride in their successful completion of the mission. The patrol had proceeded exactly according to his expectations, validating his confidence in the original route assignment and his decision to ignore unsolicited advice from unauthorized personnel. During the post-mission debriefing, Jake provided Staff Sergeant Williams with an optimistic assessment of conditions in Sector 7. He reported that the area appeared secure and recommended continued use of the same route for future patrol operations. His analysis included no mention of the suspicious soil disturbance or the thermal signatures that had appeared on Elena's surveillance feeds. Williams accepted Jake's report without question, noting the successful completion of the mission in official records. Jake felt satisfied that he had proven himself capable of independent decision-making and effective leadership during his first combat deployment assignment. Later that evening, Jake relaxed in the enlisted dining facility while recounting details of his successful patrol to other Marines. His confidence had grown considerably following the day's events, and he took particular satisfaction in having ignored tactical advice that had proven unnecessary. Elena Voss completed her shift in the Tactical Operations Center without any direct contact with Jake's patrol team. Her protective coordination had operated entirely behind the scenes, leaving no visible evidence of the multiple interventions that had ensured their safe return to base. Tomorrow would bring new missions and new opportunities to assess the tactical judgment of personnel under her observation. Communications specialist Maria Santos arrived at the Signal Operations Center before dawn, beginning another shift monitoring the complex network of encrypted channels that connected forward operating base Meridian with command centers across the theater of operations. Her workstation displayed dozens of active communication streams, each requiring different security protocols and clearance levels to access. As Maria initialized her monitoring systems, she noticed an unusual pattern in the access logs from the previous evening. Someone had utilized multiple high-classification channels during the overnight hours, displaying security credentials that exceeded those of most personnel stationed at the forward operating base. The user identification codes indicated Elena Voss had accessed strategic intelligence feeds, operational planning networks, and command coordination channels that typically required authorization from senior field-grade officers or specialized intelligence personnel. Maria cross-referenced the access records with personnel databases, finding that Elena's official file contained minimal information beyond basic assignment data. Maria's curiosity intensified when she discovered that Elena's communication access included real-time feeds from Special Operations Command and Joint Task Force Coordination Centers. These channels provided intelligence information that was normally restricted to personnel with demonstrated need to know for ongoing operations at the highest classification levels. Meanwhile, Jake Castellanos attended the morning briefing in the Operations Center, where tactical officers provided updates on intelligence assessments and planned activities for the day. Elena Voss sat in the back row of the briefing room, taking notes on her field tablet while listening to discussions about patrol routes and threat evaluations. During the question period following the formal briefing, Elena raised her hand and addressed the intelligence officer with specific inquiries about enemy movement patterns in sectors adjacent to the base perimeter. Her questions demonstrated detailed knowledge of tactical situations that surprised several attendees, including Jake. Lieutenant Morrison responded to Elena's questions with information that had not been covered in the general briefing, providing specifics about hostile activities that were normally restricted to personnel with operational responsibilities in affected areas. Jake noticed that Morrison seemed to treat Elena's inquiries as legitimate requests rather than inappropriate curiosity from unauthorized personnel. Jake felt irritated by Elena's continued attempts to involve herself in tactical discussions beyond her apparent authority level. When the briefing concluded, he approached several other junior Marines to express his frustration with what he perceived as inappropriate behavior from someone who should be focusing on her own assignment responsibilities. "Listen to wannabe officer over there," Jake said loudly enough for Elena to hear as she gathered her materials. Acting like she has some kind of special insight into intelligence matters when she should be learning basic procedures like the rest of us new arrivals. Private First Class Chun and Lance Corporal Murphy nodded their agreement with Jake's assessment, though both seemed somewhat uncertain about the situation. Elena showed no reaction to Jake's comments as she exited the briefing room, maintaining the same neutral expression that had characterized their previous encounters. Later that morning, Captain Reynolds conducted a tactical planning session for upcoming operations in the sector where Jake's patrol had operated the previous day. The session included senior personnel from intelligence, logistics, and operations divisions who would coordinate support for multiple patrol activities. Elena attended the planning session despite having no obvious role in the operational coordination being discussed. Jake expected Reynolds to question her presence or ask her to leave, but instead the captain seemed to defer to her input during discussions of route selection and threat assessment procedures. When Elena suggested modifications to the planned patrol routes based on updated intelligence about enemy activity patterns, Reynolds incorporated her recommendations directly into the operational orders without questioning her authority to provide such guidance. Jake watched this interaction with growing confusion about Elena's apparent influence on tactical decision-making. Elena's recommendations proved remarkably detailed and specific, including information about enemy personnel movements, equipment placements, and tactical preferences that seemed to come from sources unavailable to most personnel at Forward Operating Base Meridian. She spoke with technical precision about threat assessment methodologies and operational security considerations that impressed the senior officers present. Jake grew increasingly frustrated as the planning session continued, with Elena's input being treated as authoritative guidance rather than suggestions from someone without apparent qualifications. He decided to challenge her directly about the sources of her information, believing that exposing her lack of legitimate access would end her inappropriate involvement in tactical matters. "Where exactly are you getting this intelligence information?" Jake interrupted during Elena's analysis of enemy patrol patterns. "I mean, what specific sources are you using for these assessments that seem so detailed and current?" Elena paused and looked at Jake with the same steady expression she had shown during their previous encounters. "The information comes from multiple intelligence streams that are updated continuously based on surveillance activities and signal intercepts," she replied calmly. "Cross-referencing these sources provides pattern recognition that supports tactical recommendations." Jake felt unsatisfied with this general explanation, which seemed designed to avoid revealing specific sources or authorization for accessing classified information. He pressed further, hoping to expose what he believed was inappropriate speculation disguised as legitimate intelligence analysis. "That sounds like you are making educated guesses based on general information rather than providing actual intelligence assessments," Jake said, his voice carrying a tone of challenge that drew attention from other personnel in the room. "Maybe we should focus on verified information from authorized sources instead of theoretical analysis." Captain Reynolds intervened before Elena could respond to Jake's challenge. "The intelligence assessments being discussed are based on current operational data," he said firmly. "We will proceed with the tactical modifications as recommended and ensure that all patrol teams receive updated briefing materials." Jake felt surprised and somewhat embarrassed by Reynolds' support for Elena's recommendations, but he remained convinced that something irregular was occurring. After the planning session concluded, he approached Sergeant Torres privately to discuss his concerns about Elena's apparent influence on tactical decision-making processes. "Sergeant, I think there might be some kind of problem with security protocols here," Jake said quietly. "That woman has been providing tactical advice and intelligence assessments without any apparent authorization, and officers seem to be accepting her input without proper verification of her credentials." Torres listened to Jake's concerns with a thoughtful expression that revealed his own uncertainty about the situation. The sergeant had observed Elena's interactions with senior personnel and noticed the deference she received, but he lacked clear understanding of her actual role or authority within the base command structure. "I will look into the situation and make sure everything is following proper procedures," Torres told Jake. "In the meantime, focus on your own responsibilities and let the chain of command handle any irregularities that might exist." That afternoon, Sergeant Torres accessed the personnel database to research Elena's background and assignment history. Her official file contained basic biographical information and assignment orders, but most details about her previous experience and specialized training were classified at levels that exceeded Torres' access authorization. Torres discovered that Elena's security clearance indicators showed the highest available classifications, suggesting that her background included activities or information that required extraordinary protection. However, the specific nature of her experience and qualifications remained hidden behind security restrictions that prevented further investigation. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Rodriguez was updating threat assessments in the secure computer systems when he noticed Elena's user profile appeared on his access monitoring display. The security clearance levels associated with her account exceeded those of any other personnel currently assigned to Forward Operating Base Meridian, including senior officers and specialized intelligence staff. Rodriguez cross-referenced Elena's clearance codes with the authorization database and discovered that her access permissions included compartmentalized intelligence programs that were normally restricted to personnel with special operations backgrounds or senior command responsibilities. The specific nature of these programs was classified beyond his ability to research further. As Rodriguez continued his system maintenance activities, he observed that Elena's access patterns included databases and communication networks that suggested coordination with higher headquarters and specialized units operating throughout the region. Her activities indicated responsibilities that extended far beyond those of typical personnel assigned to forward operating bases. That evening, Jake organized an informal gathering of junior Marines in the enlisted dining facility to discuss what he perceived as irregularities in Elena's behavior and the inappropriate deference she received from senior personnel. He hoped to build consensus among his peers about the need to address what he saw as a breakdown in proper military protocols. Jake described his encounters with Elena and his observations of her interactions with officers during tactical planning sessions. He emphasized his belief that she was overstepping appropriate boundaries and interfering with legitimate command authority through unauthorized involvement in operational matters. Several Marines expressed agreement with Jake's concerns, though others seemed uncertain about the appropriateness of questioning the decisions made by senior officers regarding Elena's participation in tactical discussions. The conversation revealed a division of opinion about whether Elena's behavior represented a problem requiring intervention. Private First Class Chin mentioned that he had heard communications personnel discussing Elena's access to classified systems, but he lacked specific details about the nature or extent of her authorization. Lance Corporal Murphy reported observing Elena in areas of the base that were normally restricted to personnel with specialized responsibilities. Jake felt encouraged by these reports, which seemed to support his assessment that Elena was operating beyond her legitimate authority. He proposed that the group should collectively avoid following any tactical suggestions or guidance that Elena might provide, arguing that accepting unauthorized advice could compromise their own professional standing. The Marines agreed to ignore Elena's recommendations and to report any attempts she might make to provide tactical guidance or operational instructions. Jake felt satisfied that he had taken appropriate action to protect the integrity of military protocols and proper chain of command authority. As the evening concluded, Elena Voss completed her shift in the Tactical Operations Center, where she had spent the day monitoring intelligence feeds and coordinating protective measures for multiple patrol operations. Her activities remained invisible to the junior personnel who questioned her authority, operating through encrypted communication channels and classified coordination networks that existed far above their level of awareness. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for Elena to assess the tactical judgment and leadership potential of personnel under her observation, including Jake Castellanos, whose pattern of poor decision-making and resistance to guidance had become increasingly apparent through their ongoing encounters. The mission briefing room filled with tension as Captain Reynolds outlined the high-value target extraction operation scheduled for the following morning. Intelligence reports indicated that a captured coalition pilot was being held at a compound approximately 15 kilometers northeast of forward operating base Meridian, requiring immediate rescue before enemy forces could relocate the prisoner to a more secure facility. Staff Sergeant Williams would lead the extraction team consisting of 8 Marines, including Jake Castellanos as assistant team leader. The mission represented Jake's first opportunity to participate in a critical operation with direct tactical significance, and he felt eager anticipation building as Reynolds described the operational parameters and expected timeline. Elena Voss entered the briefing room carrying her field tablet and several folders containing what appeared to be supplementary intelligence materials. She took a seat near the front of the room where she could access the tactical display screen while remaining close enough to the briefing officers to provide input if requested. Reynolds acknowledged Elena's arrival with a brief nod before continuing his presentation of the mission objectives and constraints. The extraction target was being held in a compound that intelligence assets had identified through multiple surveillance sources, including signals intercepts and human intelligence reports from local sources. Elena raised her hand during the intelligence portion of the briefing, requesting permission to provide updated assessment information that had become available through overnight surveillance activities. Reynolds granted her request, and Elena approached the tactical display to present her analysis of current enemy dispositions around the target compound. The primary extraction route currently planned will expose the team to significant risk, Elena began, using a laser pointer to highlight specific areas on the compound diagram. Enemy forces have established overlapping fields of fire covering the western approach, with at least 3 confirmed machine gun positions and possible mortar support located here and here. Elena's presentation included detailed information about enemy personnel strengths, weapon placements, and defensive preparations that had not been covered in the standard intelligence briefing. Her assessment suggested that the planned extraction route would result in the team advancing directly into a prepared ambush position with minimal cover or concealment available. Jake felt his familiar irritation building as Elena continued providing tactical recommendations that contradicted the official mission planning. Her confident presentation of intelligence information struck him as another example of inappropriate involvement in operational matters that exceeded her apparent authority and qualifications. Elena recommended using an alternative approach from the northeast that would provide better concealment during the advance to the target compound. This route would require additional travel time, but would avoid the prepared defensive positions that enemy forces had established to counter extraction attempts using the more direct western approach. When Elena completed her presentation and returned to her seat, Jake requested permission to address the briefing. Reynolds granted his request, and Jake stood to present his assessment of Elena's recommendations, which he intended to challenge based on his analysis of the tactical situation. With respect, I think we should stick with the original route planning that was developed by qualified intelligence officers, Jake said, his voice carrying conviction that drew attention from other team members. The Western approach provides the most direct path to the objective, and I believe our team is capable of handling any resistance we might encounter along that route. Jake's challenge to Elena's assessment created visible tension in the briefing room as other personnel watched the confrontation unfold between the confident rookie and the woman whose authority remained unclear to most observers. Elena showed no emotional reaction to Jake's dismissal of her recommendations, maintaining the neutral expression that characterized her previous encounters. Staff Sergeant Williams found himself in the uncomfortable position of mediating between conflicting tactical assessments from 2 sources with very different apparent credentials. Jake represented established chain of command authority through his official assignment as assistant team leader, while Elena's recommendations carried weight that Williams could not fully understand or explain. The original route has been thoroughly analyzed and approved through proper planning channels, Jake continued, directing his comments toward Williams rather than Elena. I recommend we maintain confidence in official mission planning rather than modifying proven procedures based on unverified intelligence sources. Williams hesitated as he considered the competing recommendations. Elena's assessment included specific details about enemy dispositions that seemed remarkably current and accurate, but Jake's emphasis on following established procedures aligned with military doctrine regarding chain of command and authorized decision-making processes. Elena spoke quietly from her seat without standing or attempting to dominate the discussion. The intelligence I presented comes from surveillance activities conducted specifically for this mission, she said calmly. The enemy defensive preparations I described were confirmed through multiple sources within the past 6 hours. Jake turned to face Elena directly, his frustration now clearly visible to everyone present in the briefing room. Look, I do not know what kind of game you are playing here, but this is a real mission with real lives at stake, he said, his voice rising slightly with emphasis. We cannot afford to second-guess official planning based on whatever sources you think you have access to. The confrontation escalated as Jake pressed his challenge to Elena's authority and qualifications. Who exactly authorized you to provide tactical assessments for this mission? He demanded. What specific credentials do you have that qualify you to override planning decisions made by legitimate intelligence officers? Captain Reynolds intervened before Elena could respond to Jake's direct challenge. The mission will proceed using the originally planned Western approach route, he announced firmly. Final preparation will begin immediately, and the team will deploy at 0600 hours tomorrow morning. Williams accepted Reynolds' decision and began organizing the final mission briefing elements that would prepare the extraction team for their deployment. Elena gathered her materials and exited the briefing room without further comment, though Jake noticed that several senior personnel watched her departure with expressions that suggested concern about the tactical decision that had been made. Jake felt vindicated by the outcome of the confrontation, believing that he had successfully defended proper military procedures against inappropriate interference from unauthorized personnel. His confidence in his own tactical judgment increased as he prepared for the most significant mission of his deployment experience. The following morning brought clear skies and moderate temperatures as the extraction team completed their final equipment checks and prepared for deployment. Jake reviewed his mission responsibilities one last time, focusing on navigation and communication procedures that would coordinate the team's advance toward the target compound. Williams conducted a final briefing that emphasized the importance of maintaining formation discipline and communication security during the approach to the extraction site. The western route would require approximately 45 minutes of movement through terrain that provided limited concealment, demanding careful coordination to avoid detection by enemy forces. As the team prepared to depart forward operating base Meridian, Elena appeared at the Tactical Operations Center, where she activated multiple monitoring systems and established communication links with various support elements. Her access to these systems proceeded without any authorization requests or approval procedures, suggesting standing permissions that exceeded normal operational protocols. Elena's workstation displayed real-time surveillance feeds from multiple sources, including drone cameras that provided overhead coverage of the extraction route and target compound. She could observe Jake's team as they departed the base and began their movement toward the western approach that had been selected despite her warnings. Jake's radio communications began as his team reached the initial phase line, marking their entry into potentially hostile territory. Alpha Team departing phase line Alpha, proceeding to objective via Route West, he transmitted, using call signs that provided unnecessary specificity about their location and intended movement. Elena monitored these communications while simultaneously accessing intelligence databases that continued showing enemy activity in exactly the areas where Jake's team would be most vulnerable. Her screens displayed heat signatures indicating hostile personnel in prepared positions overlooking the western approach route that Jake had insisted on using. As Jake's team advanced deeper into enemy territory, Elena activated emergency coordination protocols that connected her directly with close air support assets, quick reaction forces, and medical evacuation teams that could provide immediate assistance if the mission encountered difficulties. These preparations operated entirely behind the scenes, invisible to Jake's team as they moved toward the target compound. Elena's surveillance feeds showed enemy forces tracking the approaching extraction team through the limited concealment provided by the western route. Machine gun positions that Elena had identified during her briefing were manned and ready to engage targets moving along the predicted approach path that Jake had defended. The critical moment arrived when Jake's team reached the final approach to the target compound. Elena watched through drone cameras as enemy forces initiated their ambush exactly where her intelligence assessment had predicted, opening coordinated fire that pinned down the extraction team in a devastatingly effective crossfire. Jake's panicked radio transmission broke through communication protocols as his team came under immediate heavy fire. "Alpha team taking fire, Alpha team taking fire," he shouted into his microphone. "We are pinned down and need immediate support. Enemy positions all around us." Elena's emergency protocols activated instantly as she assumed direct operational control of the rescue response. Her encrypted communication channels connected simultaneously with attack helicopter crews, artillery support coordinators, and rapid reaction forces that had been positioned for exactly this contingency. Close air support assets received precise targeting information from Elena's surveillance feeds, enabling immediate engagement of the enemy positions that were threatening Jake's trapped team. Attack helicopters appeared over the battlefield within minutes, delivering suppressive fire that neutralized the machine gun positions Elena had warned about during the mission briefing. Elena coordinated the complex rescue operation through multiple communication networks, directing ground forces, air support, and medical teams with authority that superseded normal command structures. Her tactical coordination demonstrated capabilities that operated far above the level typically available at forward operating bases. Rapid response teams arrived at Jake's location under Elena's guidance, providing the firepower and tactical expertise necessary to extract the pinned-down team from their desperate situation. Elena's real-time intelligence coordination enabled the rescue forces to approach through routes that avoided additional enemy positions. Jake's team was successfully extracted from the ambush site after 45 minutes of intense combat that could have resulted in multiple casualties without Elena's immediate intervention. The original extraction mission had to be aborted due to the compromise of the approach route, exactly as Elena's intelligence assessment had predicted. During the emergency evacuation back to forward operating base Meridian, Jake remained silent as the magnitude of his tactical error became clear. His insistence on using the western approach route had led directly to the ambush that Elena had warned against, nearly resulting in the loss of his entire team. The rescue operation demonstrated Elena's access to command authority that extended far beyond anything that junior personnel at the base had imagined possible. Her coordination of multiple military assets revealed capabilities that could only belong to someone with extraordinary authorization and operational responsibility. As Jake's team returned to base under medical evaluation and tactical debriefing procedures, Elena continued coordinating with higher headquarters to analyze the intelligence failures that had enabled enemy forces to prepare such an effective ambush. Her activities suggested ongoing responsibilities that extended far beyond the immediate crisis response she had just managed. The post-mission debriefing room fell silent as Captain Reynolds activated the large tactical display screen that would show complete video footage from the failed extraction operation. Jake Castellanos sat in the front row alongside other members of his extraction team, all of whom had been required to attend the comprehensive analysis of the ambush that had nearly cost their lives. Multiple camera angles provided simultaneous coverage of the mission from start to finish. Helmet-mounted cameras from individual team members, drone surveillance feeds, and base security recordings created a comprehensive record of every decision and action that had led to the tactical disaster in Sector 7. Reynolds began the footage review at the point where Jake's team departed forward operating base Meridian using the western approach route. The overhead drone cameras showed the extraction team moving through terrain that provided minimal concealment, exactly as Elena Voss had warned during the mission briefing that Jake had challenged. Jake watched himself leading the team along a path that brought them directly toward the prepared enemy positions that Elena had identified through her intelligence sources. The aerial perspective revealed how completely exposed his team had been during their approach, moving predictably along routes that enemy forces had obviously anticipated and prepared to defend. The footage transitioned to communications recordings that documented every radio transmission made during the mission. Jake's voice could be heard providing unnecessarily specific position reports that violated basic operational security protocols, enabling enemy forces to track his team's movement with precision timing. Staff Sergeant Williams paused the video playback to address the communication security violations that were clearly visible in the recorded material. These transmission procedures directly enabled the enemy to coordinate their ambush timing, he said grimly. Proper radio discipline could have prevented the tactical compromise that led to the engagement. Jake felt growing discomfort as the analysis continued, revealing the multiple errors in judgment and procedure that had characterized his leadership during the mission. The video evidence provided objective documentation of mistakes that could no longer be dismissed or explained away through alternative interpretations. Reynolds resumed the footage playback at the moment when Jake's team encountered the first indication of enemy presence near the target compound. The drone cameras showed heat signatures from concealed personnel in exactly the positions that Elena had identified during her intelligence briefing, confirming the accuracy of her threat assessment. The ambush initiation appeared on multiple camera feeds simultaneously, showing coordinated enemy fire from machine gun positions and mortar teams that had been prepared specifically to target extraction teams using the Western approach route. The effectiveness of the enemy preparation demonstrated sophisticated intelligence about coalition tactical procedures. Jake's panicked radio transmissions during the ambush played through speakers in the debriefing room, documenting his loss of composure and breakdown of leadership when his team came under effective enemy fire. His calls for assistance violated communication protocols while providing additional intelligence to hostile forces monitoring coalition frequencies. Reynolds paused the playback again to highlight the moment when emergency response protocols activated automatically. The rescue coordination that saved Jake's team had proceeded through command authority that operated completely outside the normal tactical structure of Forward Operating Base Meridian. The next segment of footage showed close air support aircraft arriving with response times that indicated advanced positioning and preparation rather than emergency deployment from distant locations. Attack helicopters engaged enemy targets with precision that suggested real-time intelligence coordination from sources with comprehensive battlefield awareness. Communications specialist Maria Santos raised her hand to request clarification about the encrypted channel access that had enabled such rapid response coordination. The emergency protocols shown in these recordings required authorization levels that exceed those of personnel normally assigned to forward operating bases, she said carefully. Reynolds acknowledged Santos' observation while activating additional footage that would address her questions about the command authority behind the rescue operation. The screen displayed recordings from the Tactical Operations Center that showed Elena Voss coordinating multiple military assets with efficiency that demonstrated extraordinary familiarity with operational procedures. Jake watched in growing amazement as the footage revealed Elena simultaneously directing attack helicopters, artillery support, rapid reaction forces, and medical evacuation teams through communication channels that he had never seen accessed by other personnel at the base. Her coordination abilities suggested experience and authority that far exceeded anything he had imagined possible. Staff Sergeant Kim requested access to communication archives to research the specific authorization codes that Elena had used during the emergency response. Her search through classified databases revealed that Elena's call sign appeared in mission records spanning multiple theaters of operation over a period of several years. The call sign Shrike 6 appeared in operational archives connected with special operations missions throughout the Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. Kim's research showed Elena's involvement in high-risk extraction operations, counterterrorism activities, and intelligence coordination missions that required the highest levels of security clearance and operational authority. Reynolds authorized Kim to access Elena's complete personnel file through the secure military personnel database. The information revealed that Elena Voss held the rank of commander and was assigned to the Special Activities Division, a unit that coordinated classified operations across multiple geographic regions and command structures. Elena's service record showed 15 years of special operations experience, including multiple combat deployments, advanced tactical training, and specialized qualifications in intelligence analysis, operational coordination, and personnel assessment. Her background included command responsibilities for missions that operated at the strategic level of military operations. Jake felt shock and disbelief as the scope of Elena's qualifications became clear through the official documentation displayed on the briefing room screen. The woman he had dismissed as an inexperienced trainee possessed more operational experience and authority than any other personnel currently assigned to Forward Operating Base Meridian. The personnel file revealed that Elena's current assignment involved assessment of tactical judgment and leadership potential among junior personnel throughout the theater of operations. Her presence at Forward Operating Base Meridian was specifically authorized for the purpose of evaluating command readiness and identifying personnel who required additional training or disciplinary action. Reynolds resumed the video footage to show Elena's coordination activities during the rescue operation from her perspective in the Tactical Operations Center. The recordings demonstrated her access to intelligence sources and command networks that operated at levels normally reserved for senior field-grade officers and specialized operational units. Elena's tactical decisions during the rescue had prevented what would certainly have been multiple casualties among Jake's extraction team. Her real-time intelligence analysis and resource coordination had overcome the tactical errors that resulted from Jake's insistence on using the compromised approach route she had warned against. The video analysis revealed that Elena's original recommendations would have enabled the extraction mission to proceed successfully through the northeastern approach that avoided prepared enemy positions. Her intelligence assessment had been completely accurate, while Jake's challenge to her authority had led directly to mission failure and near-catastrophic losses. Jake realized that his dismissive treatment of Elena constituted insubordination toward a senior officer whose authority and experience far exceeded his own. His public challenges to her tactical guidance had demonstrated exactly the kind of poor judgment and leadership failures that her assessment mission was designed to identify and correct. Other Marines in the debriefing room came to similar realizations as the scope of Elena's actual rank and responsibility became clear. They had witnessed a junior enlisted Marine repeatedly showing disrespect toward a commanding officer whose identity had been concealed for operational security purposes related to her assessment activities. Private First Class Chun and Lance Corporal Murphy exchanged uncomfortable glances as they recalled their agreement with Jake's criticism of Elena during conversations in the enlisted dining facility. Their participation in Jake's campaign against Elena's authority now appeared as involvement in a pattern of insubordination that could result in serious disciplinary consequences. Reynolds concluded the video analysis by announcing that formal disciplinary procedures would be initiated to address the multiple violations of military protocol that had been documented during the mission. Jake's leadership failures, communication security breaches, and insubordination towards senior authority would be subject to investigation through proper legal channels. Staff Sergeant Williams was directed to prepare comprehensive incident reports detailing each aspect of Jake's misconduct that had contributed to mission failure and endangered personnel safety. The documentation would support formal charges of insubordination, reckless endangerment, and failure to follow lawful orders from authorized command authority. Jake faced the prospect of court-martial proceedings that could result in reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, confinement, or dismissal from military service. His pattern of poor judgment and disrespect toward legitimate authority had created consequences that extended far beyond the immediate tactical failures of the extraction mission. Elena Voss had completed the most critical phase of her personnel assessment mission by documenting Jake's unsuitability for leadership responsibilities in operational environments. Her comprehensive analysis would prevent his advancement to positions where his judgment failures could endanger additional personnel or compromise mission success. As the debriefing concluded, Jake remained seated while other personnel filed out of the room to resume their normal duties. The magnitude of his mistakes had become undeniably clear through the objective evidence provided by video footage and official documentation that could not be disputed or explained away. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of formal disciplinary proceedings that would determine Jake's future in military service. His confrontation with Elena Voss had revealed fundamental character flaws that disqualified him from the leadership positions he had sought to achieve through his deployment assignment. Elena's assessment mission would continue with other personnel whose judgment and character required evaluation, but Jake Castellanos had demonstrated beyond doubt that he lacked the qualities necessary for advancement in military service. His career would bear the permanent consequences of his failure to recognize and respect legitimate authority when it appeared in unexpected forms. Jake Castellanos stood at attention in Captain Reynolds' office as the formal reprimand proceedings began 3 days after the failed extraction mission. The charges against him included insubordination toward a senior officer, reckless endangerment of personnel under his command, and failure to follow lawful orders during operational activities. Reynolds read each charge with clinical precision, while Jake maintained military bearing despite the crushing weight of documented evidence that supported every allegation. The video footage and communication recordings provided undeniable proof of his misconduct, leaving no possibility for dispute or alternative explanations. The formal reprimand would remain in Jake's permanent military record, effectively ending any prospects for advancement to leadership positions during his remaining service commitment. Additional consequences included reduction in rank to private first class, forfeiture of 30 days' pay, and mandatory enrollment in military leadership remedial training. Reynolds emphasized that Jake's survival and that of his team members had depended entirely on the professional competence of Commander Elena Voss, whose authority Jake had repeatedly challenged and dismissed. Without Elena's intervention during the ambush, the mission would have resulted in multiple casualties that could have been prevented through proper respect for legitimate command guidance. Following the formal disciplinary proceedings, Jake was directed to report to Elena's temporary office for mandatory counseling sessions designed to address the attitude and judgment problems that had led to his misconduct. Elena had requested private meetings with Jake to complete her personnel assessment and provide guidance that might salvage his military career. Jake knocked on Elena's office door with considerable apprehension about facing the senior officer he had treated with such disrespect during their previous encounters. Elena granted permission for him to enter, and he found her seated behind a standard military desk reviewing files that appeared to contain comprehensive documentation of his performance. Elena gestured for Jake to take a seat across from her desk while she completed her review of the incident reports and disciplinary documentation. Her manner remained professional and neutral, showing neither anger nor satisfaction about the consequences that had resulted from Jake's poor judgment and misconduct. Jake, Elena began quietly, my assignment here involves assessing the leadership potential and tactical judgment of junior personnel throughout this theater of operations. Your case represents exactly the kind of assessment challenge that my mission is designed to address and hopefully correct. Elena explained that her presence at Forward Operating Base Meridian had been specifically authorized to evaluate personnel who showed promise, but also demonstrated concerning patterns of behavior that could endanger mission success or unit cohesion. Jake's combination of confidence and poor judgment had made him a priority subject for her assessment activities. During the past week, you have demonstrated several critical failures in judgment, communication, and respect for authority, Elena continued. However, you have also shown courage, dedication to your team, and willingness to take responsibility when confronted with the consequences of your decisions. Elena's assessment included recognition that Jake's fundamental character contained positive qualities that could be developed through proper mentoring and training. His mistakes had resulted from inexperience, overconfidence, and failure to recognize legitimate authority rather than malicious intent or fundamental character flaws that could not be corrected. The counseling session continued with Elena providing detailed analysis of each tactical error that Jake had made during the extraction mission. Her explanations helped him understand how his decisions had created cascading failures that nearly resulted in catastrophic consequences for his team and the overall mission objectives. Elena emphasized that effective military leadership required the ability to recognize and accept guidance from sources that might not conform to expected patterns or formal presentations. Her undercover assessment role had been designed to test exactly this kind of judgment, revealing personnel who could adapt to unexpected situations versus those who relied too heavily on rigid procedures. Jake listened carefully as Elena described the intelligence sources and coordination networks that had enabled her to provide accurate threat assessments and emergency response during the ambush. Her explanations revealed the complex operational environment in which forward-deployed units operated, supported by resources and capabilities that remained invisible to most personnel. "Commander Voss," Jake said hesitantly, "I need to apologize for my behavior and my failure to recognize your authority and experience. I made assumptions based on appearances rather than listening to the substance of your guidance, and those assumptions nearly got people killed." Elena accepted Jake's apology while emphasizing that his recognition of his mistakes represented the first step toward developing the judgment and maturity required for effective military leadership. She outlined a development plan that could help him overcome the attitude problems that had led to his disciplinary difficulties. The remedial training program that Jake would attend included modules on tactical decision-making, communication protocols, and recognition of authority structures in complex operational environments. Elena had specifically designed these training elements to address the deficiencies she had observed during her assessment of his performance. Meanwhile, Reynolds was implementing broader changes to training protocols throughout Forward Operating Base Meridian based on Elena's recommendations for improving personnel readiness and tactical competence. Her assessment had identified systemic problems that extended beyond Jake's individual misconduct. Enhanced briefing procedures would ensure that all personnel received more comprehensive information about intelligence sources and assessment methodologies. Elena had observed that junior personnel lacked understanding of the complex coordination networks that supported their operations, leading to poor judgment about the reliability of various information sources. New protocols required formal introduction of assessment personnel and explanation of their roles during initial briefings, preventing the confusion and resistance that had characterized Jake's interactions with Elena. Future assessment missions would operate with greater transparency while maintaining necessary operational security. Staff Sergeant Williams received additional training on recognizing and managing situations where personnel challenged legitimate authority from unexpected sources. Elena's recommendations included procedures for verifying authority and resolving conflicts without compromising operational security or mission effectiveness. Communications Specialist Maria Santos was promoted to Senior Communications Coordinator with expanded responsibilities for monitoring and analyzing the complex networks that connected Forward Operating Base Meridian with higher headquarters and specialized units. Her observations during Elena's mission had demonstrated exceptional awareness of communication security and operational coordination. Private First Class Chun and Lance Corporal Murphy completed counseling sessions addressing their participation in Jake's insubordination campaign. Elena's assessment determined that their involvement resulted from poor judgment rather than malicious intent, recommending additional training rather than formal disciplinary action. Sergeant Torres received commendation for his professional handling of the complex situation involving Elena's assessment activities. His efforts to research Elena's background and verify proper procedures had demonstrated exactly the kind of responsible leadership that Elena's mission was designed to identify and promote. The institutional changes implemented throughout Forward Operating Base Meridian created lasting improvements to unit culture and operational procedures. Elena's assessment mission had revealed weaknesses that could have compromised future operations if they had not been identified and corrected through systematic intervention. Jake's final counseling session with Elena focused on his future prospects within military service and the steps he could take to overcome the negative consequences of his documented misconduct. Elena emphasized that his current situation, while serious, did not necessarily preclude eventual rehabilitation and advancement. Your performance during the remainder of your deployment will determine whether you can overcome the problems documented in your record, Elena explained. Demonstrating consistent improvement in judgment, communication, and respect for authority could eventually enable you to regain opportunities for leadership responsibilities. Elena provided Jake with specific recommendations for professional development activities that could support his rehabilitation efforts. These included voluntary training programs, mentorship relationships, and assignment opportunities that would allow him to demonstrate improved judgment and leadership potential. As Jake prepared to leave Elena's office for the final time, She offered one additional piece of guidance that summarized the most important lessons from their encounters. Military leadership requires the ability to recognize competence and authority regardless of how they might appear, she said quietly. Your assumptions about others will determine your effectiveness as a leader far more than your own capabilities. Jake thanked Elena for her patience and guidance throughout the assessment process, acknowledging that her intervention had prevented consequences far worse than the disciplinary action he had received. Her professional approach to his mistakes had provided opportunities for learning and growth that could eventually lead to redemption of his military career. Elena Voss completed her comprehensive assessment report on personnel at Forward Operating Base Meridian, documenting the institutional improvements and individual development recommendations that resulted from her mission. Jake's case would serve as a model for future assessment activities and training programs designed to identify and correct similar problems. 2 weeks later, Elena departed Forward Operating Base Meridian for her next assignment at a training facility where similar assessment challenges required her expertise and experience. Her mission had accomplished its objectives through systematic evaluation of personnel readiness and implementation of corrective measures that would have lasting positive effects. Jake watched Elena's departure transport disappear into the desert sky, carrying away the officer whose professional competence and patience had saved his life and possibly his career. Her assessment mission had revealed his limitations while providing the guidance necessary to overcome them through sustained effort and commitment to improvement. The changes implemented at Forward Operating Base Meridian continued to influence training and operational procedures long after Elena's departure. Her recommendations became standard protocol for personnel assessment and development activities throughout the theater of operations, preventing similar incidents from occurring at other installations. Jake's subsequent performance during the remainder of his deployment demonstrated the positive effects of Elena's intervention and guidance. His improved judgment and communication skills contributed to successful mission outcomes, while rebuilding the professional reputation that his earlier mistakes had damaged. 6 months later, Elena received notification that Jake Castellanos had been selected for promotion back to Lance Corporal based on sustained improvement in leadership performance and tactical decision-making. Her assessment and intervention had succeeded in salvaging the career of a Marine whose potential had been nearly destroyed by inexperience and poor judgment. Elena's next assignment would take her to a special operations training facility where advanced personnel required assessment for the most demanding military missions. Her proven ability to evaluate character under pressure and provide effective developmental guidance made her uniquely qualified for such responsibilities. The legacy of Elena's mission at Forward Operating Base Meridian continued through the improved procedures and enhanced training programs that prevented other junior personnel from making the same mistakes that had nearly ended Jake's military career. Her professional competence had created lasting positive change that extended far beyond any individual assessment.